Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Clarke County Public Schools Disparity Study Informational Meeting. It is just now 5 o'clock, so we'll wait about another 5 minutes to let others join us. Again, for those of you who are just joining us, welcome to the informational meeting for the 2023 Clarke County Public Schools Disparity Study. We're giving time for a few more to join us. I think we had about 50 who signed up for this meeting. So we'll wait another couple of minutes and then we'll get started and let them join us along the way. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started and let others join us as we go along. Good evening again. My name is Michelle Clarke Jenkins. I head the consulting group of Griffin and Strong. Joining me tonight is Trinity Williams, who is the Deputy Project Manager on the disparity study for the Clarke County Public Schools. So hold on, let me share my screen. Tonight is our informational meeting. So what I'm going to do is run through a PowerPoint that explains information about the disparity study. And when I'm done, you all are welcome to ask questions. Okay, so Griffin and Strong is a law and public policy consulting firm. We're based in Atlanta. We're a 30-year-old company. This is our consulting division. This is all we do. We do disparity research, disparity studies. We do contract compliance. We do program development, training, and supplier diversity consulting. We draft legislation. We've even run programs for some of our clients. So this is all we do. We have four, actually says four, we actually have 5 attorneys on our team, 2 PhD economists, a PhD in social psychology, and a PhD in anthropology. Disparity studies are really a creation of the court, so it is important to note that no study we've ever done has ever been challenged or overturned in court. However, we have defended other studies that are not ones we've done. And so our 2 leads on this, our project executive, Rodney Strong, was the Director of Contract Compliance for the City of Atlanta's Department of Contract Compliance. He was also the project manager on the first post-Croson, and I'll explain what Croson is in a minute, disparity study. And he was the principal architect of the City of Atlanta's MWBE program, which became the model for the nation. Our principal researcher, Dr. Vince Egan, is one of the foremost experts nationwide. He's actually one of the remaining expert witnesses who defends these kinds of programs. He's conducted over 120 studies and successfully defended 6 as an expert witness, and recently a 7th, all being successfully defended. So you are in good hands. So a disparity study, if I start really kind of with the basics, a disparity study is an objective research tool that determines whether there are disparities in government agencies' procurement activities for certain groups. It was created to measure race and gender. However, sometimes it's used for race and gender neutral measurements like small businesses, veterans, disabled, service disabled, LGBTQ. So, but it is a creation, again, a disparity study is a creation of the court. Again, I'll explain that a little more. At the end of this study, we expect that we will make recommendations to Clarke County Public Schools, and that those recommendations will become policy. Disparity study uses 2 mechanisms. One is statistical and the other is qualitative. So why do we do disparity studies? I don't know, David Maher, who's head of our, you just popped in at the right point, David. David Maher heads our legal division of Griffin and Strong. So I'll let him actually take this. I know he probably just popped on, but David, you want to explain why we do disparity studies?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Excuse me. The reason we do disparity studies is to try and formulate a factual basis for any remedial contracting program or policy that we might recommend for the school district. And so what does that mean, the need for a factual basis? This really arises out of the case of City of Richmond, Virginia versus J.A. Croson Company, which you see on the slide. And essentially that case held a couple of things that are important. The first is that it invited disparity studies be used in order to establish a factual basis for a remedial program. But it also established that if there is a remedial program, it needs to pass strict constitutional scrutiny, which is the highest level of constitutional scrutiny. And the quick answer to that, the reason for that is that it's a 14th Amendment equal protection issue anytime you have a race-based or race-conscious element to your program. And so under that strict scrutiny standard, you have to have a strong basis in evidence that there is need for remediation. And then it needs to be narrowly tailored to remedy only the disparity that you identified in the study itself. So you avoid over-inclusion or under-inclusion. And then the case law established since 1989 has shown different methodologies that are used in order to have a defensible study and ultimately any remedial programs that may come from that study. And so we have based our methodology over, consistent with the case law that has happened since the J.A. Croson decision in 1989. And those different methodologies are going to be discussed in this presentation as well.
Okay, thank you very much, David. Okay, so our methodology and approach. So these are all of the steps that go into the process of completing a disparity study. It's why it takes at least a year for these to be done. David will be doing, or has done actually, the legal analysis for the study. We do a deep dive into policies and procedures. We collect a lot of data. Actually, data collection and cleaning is the biggest portion of the time. It starts kind of near the end of the disparity study and is one of the last things to be completed. And then various analysis, all of which I'll talk about individually, ending with our final report. So the policy review really wants to find out, do policies as they're written present a barrier to MWBE firms? And so we review all of the procurement policies. We also do interviews with staff. So are the policies understood by the staff? Is there a discrepancy in policy between what's written and the policy as implemented? And then, of course, what policies can be modified to promote inclusion? Our first analysis is utilization. And so in order to accomplish that, we have to first look at who are we studying? So where are the firms located that are part of the study? So that's part of what we call a relevant market analysis, both geographic as well as product. So we want to find out where Clarke County Schools is spending its dollars. And so that we utilize payments in order to determine utilization. We look at both prime and subcontractors, and then we disaggregate that data by year, industry categories, and our industry categories are construction, construction-related professional services, sometimes called A&E, other professional services, other services, and goods. So we disaggregate by those groups, and then again by each ethnic and racial and gender category. So African Americans, Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans, Native Americans, non-minority women, and then there is a non-MWBE group, which includes non-minority male-owned firms. It could include non-certified MWBE firms and publicly held companies. We also look at do a threshold analysis. So there's always becomes this question of capacity. Are firms capable of performing services? Do they have the capacity? So in order to determine whether firms have the capacity, we have to figure out what level of contracting Clarke County Public Schools is doing. So are you doing a lot of $5 million contracts, or are you doing a lot of $250,000 or $50,000 contracts? It also helps us to see whether there are opportunities for smaller firms. So one of the criticisms always is that we hear a lot is, well, you've indicated these firms as ready, willing, and able, but they can't do $5 million contracts. Well, that may be true, but is the county doing all $5 million contracts? Or are they doing a lot of $50,000 or $25,000 or $100,000 contracts where capacity is not an issue? And then availability is this ready and willing, probably most controversial part of disparity studies. Who are the ready, willing, and able firms to perform on this? And we use a methodology called a list-based approach, where we look at firms who are at least registered to do business with governments. We look at bidders, vendors, awardees, payees, certified minority and women-owned firms, and we do look at third-party vendor and certified firms, like the Georgia Department of Transportation's list, or maybe the City of Atlanta's list. Again, only firms who are in that relevant market. So if your relevant market is, I don't know, the Athens, Clarke County metropolitan statistical area, then we're only counting firms within that area. But we have to first figure out what is your relevant market, which is where you're spending. Clarke County Public Schools is spending at least 75% of your dollars. So where that relevant economic marketplace where they're already doing business is actually a calculation itself. And then we do a disparity analysis, which is a comparison between utilization and availability. So for example, if there are 100 engineering firms in what we determine to be the Clarke County Public Schools relevant market area, and 10 of those engineering firms are Hispanic American owned, then there is a 10% availability. But then when we look at the utilization or the spend, if we only see 2% of the dollars for engineering firms being spent with Hispanic American owned firms, then we have a 10% availability compared to a 2% spend. So we have a disparity. Then we test to see if that disparity is statistically significant. A 2% utilization is likely, compared to 10% availability, is likely to be statistically significant. If that was 9%, probably not. And then the last test is a regression analysis. So can that disparity be explained by something other than the race and gender status of the owner? And so we look at things like how long the firms have been in business, the age of the owners, the education of the owners, the revenues of the firm, how many employees they have. So we look at things that could possibly explain the disparity. We kind of equal all those out. And if at the end we're still left with a disparity, then we can make what the courts call an inference of discrimination. We go one step further and we also look at the private sector. So outside of Clarke County Public Schools' own spend, what's happening in its economic marketplace? Because remember that economic marketplace is the feeder of the ready, willing, and able firms into Clarke County Public Schools. So we look at things like, is there self-employment disparities? So what's the likelihood of firms to be employed in that marketplace? We also look at construction market disparities through building permit data. That's a really good measure. So where there are no programs, where there is nothing else, and then you look at just sheerly what's happening in that economic marketplace, are there disparities there? And then of course we look at credit market disparities. What is the availability of loans to both minority women and non-minority owned firms? So then the next piece is our public engagement piece, which you're a part of tonight. Once we kind of calculate statistically whether there's a disparity or not, if there's a disparity, how do we remediate that? What do we do about that? What could be a possible cause for that? So we kind of look to the business community to see that. And so we do a lot of different connection to the business community. Tonight's informational meeting, we do one-on-one anecdotal interviews. We do a survey of business owners where we can really be able to quantify the responses. We do public hearings later on in the process, as well as focus groups. And we also interview business, civic, trade organizations. And so if you know of any organizations that you feel like we need to connect with, please let us know in the chat room, and we will be reaching out to those organizations. And then finally, we ask for email comments. That's very helpful for people who don't want to make public statements but want to tell us their story. You're welcome to email us. Or if you have questions or other kinds of comments, we do have a dedicated email address. Then at the end of the study, we do present our findings and recommendations. We look first at race and gender neutral remedies. And then if we feel as those are not adequate, then we'll go to race and gender conscious remedies. So how you can get involved. We really need your involvement. So again, tonight is a good step in the right direction. But if you're contacted for an anecdotal interview or to, we send you the survey, which we will because you're already on our email list. If you're contacted to participate in a focus group, please say yes. And then you can also email any of your comments to that dedicated email address I mentioned, Clarke County School Study at gspclaw.com. Trinity, if you would also put both the email address as well as the dedicated website in the chat room. So again, we do have a dedicated website, which is up and running, called Clarke County Schools DisparityStudy.com. Hopefully that's easy to remember, but it's kind of long. Clarke County Schools DisparityStudy.com. We will be posting information about upcoming meetings, more information about our firm, about the study itself and who is conducting it. Okay, so that's our presentation. We are open for questions. No questions. I answered them all.
I have a question. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Part of my question is kind of a long question. I got to give a little bit of context to it. One thing that I've noticed in terms of disparity with the local government, and I can't say for certain that it's going on with the school district as well, but the the actual amount of contracts and prime contractors that are minority, that fit into the minority categories, is usually lacking on the government side. Like I haven't seen a lot of like large contracts given out to Black-owned or minority-owned businesses, and so I would suspect that something similar may be happening with the school district in terms of like when they have capital projects, like new builds or renovations of schools. I see a lot of those contracts going to non-minority businesses or white-owned businesses. And so my question is, are y'all going to be also assessing the amount of the contracts given? I remember you mentioning like the sub and the prime contractors, but is that also just one of the markers that y'all will be looking at, I guess on its own individually, in terms of the amount of contracts awarded? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So we're measuring, and it's one of the best measures. We're using dollars, so actual payments. So who were payments made to over a 5-year period in all of those categories? So yes, we do look at awards when we do threshold analysis, but awards is kind of what's promised. So there's an award, you know, you might be promised an award of $1 million or of, you know, $100,000. But what we measure is what was actually paid out. So yeah, we are looking, and we do it, we break that down by ethnicity and gender. So in terms of Black-owned firms, that was your question, we'll be able to see exactly all the dollars that were spent with Black-owned firms, as well as Asian and Hispanic and Native American and non-minority female-owned firms over the last 5 years. And we'll present that as a percentage of all dollars that went out. And of course, what's important is to compare that to the availability of firms, the percentage of so what would be expected. So you have to look at not population or just in a vacuum, not the dollars that were spent with minority and women-owned firms. You have to compare that to their availability in the marketplace. And so that's kind of the heart of the study that we're doing.
Right. And if I may follow up to that question, I don't want to take up too much time, but I do have to hop off soon. One of my other follow-ups to that is, I mean, there are other barriers, and I know you said y'all would be also assessing some of those barriers. I guess my question would be, what barriers are y'all looking at in terms of some of those other forces that prohibit minority-owned businesses from doing business at a certain level or having capacity to do business at a certain level, like lines of credit. Historically, you know, the banking system, credit system, there's just some disparities there that you see play out from historical context of African Americans not having access to family wealth or homes to back certain loans or just assets to get like a certain level of credit. And so are y'all taking all of that into consideration as well?
Yes, like as I mentioned, one of our measures is to look at credit market disparities.
Right.
So we are doing analysis of any discrimination in the credit markets.
Okay. And then my last question, which just escaped me. Hopefully I'll think about it in a,
Okay.
Oh, I remember what it was. You mentioned that after the study is over, that policy would come from, or policy usually follows the study after it's delivered to the agency that you're doing it for. And so similar to like the local government is going through a similar process. And one of the things that the company that's doing that study mentioned is that once the study is done, they put it in the hands of the local government officials, but it's up to the constituents and the business owners or minority business owners to summons, I guess, some level of organization to make sure they follow through with some of the recommendations that come out of the disparity study. Is that going to be a similar process that would need to happen here, or are you saying that they have already agreed to craft some type of policy based off of this disparity study?
Yeah, so same thing that you heard before, which is we do not have the power. We're not the legislature to enact what we recommend. All we can do is recommend it, and then your elected officials will determine what, if any of our study is accepted and implemented. So yes, so stand by for when the study is completed, but that's the intention. You know, when we took on this engagement, the intention of the Clarke County Public Schools wasn't just to do a study and have it sit on a shelf, but to implement and effectuate some of the things that come out of the study.
All right, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Any more questions? I have a question in the chat room. Are there any rules such as spending caps regarding goods and services CCSD acquires from Amazon? So I don't know the answer to that question about caps from Amazon, but Amazon any purchases they would be conducting with Amazon would go into that category of non-MWB, so non-minority or women-owned firms. So when we do our analysis, our analysis to see if minority and women-owned firms are getting their fair share of contracts or fair share of dollars. And so that'll come up in our analysis because Amazon would go into the kind of control group dollars. But spending caps wouldn't come in. So we would not be analyzing spending caps. We would just be analyzing whether the various groups are getting their fair share of contracts.
All right, I think I got it. Sorry. So you say you go back for 5 years for the study. Is there Clarke County has done a lot of newer construction, but 5 years post. And so is there any reason why you only go to 5 years, or is that a request made by Clarke County for those years?
Yeah, so disparity studies are typically 5 years, kind of a rule of thumb. It's not an absolute, but the reason 5 years works is because we want to see trends. We want to see, that's why we disaggregate the data by year. So you're not just looking at a year that could be an anomaly, but you also don't want to go back so far that the data's stale and really doesn't have any impact on today. We do know we've got the pandemic in the middle, so that's a really good example. That 5 years, thankfully, will kind of give us a little bit before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and a little bit of us coming out. So it may actually be a good measure moving forward, rather than, for example, having all pre-pandemic data. Mm-hmm. More questions? Again, if there are things that you would like to comment on or questions you have, that in the chat room is the email address. Trinity monitors that email, that dedicated email, and will respond to you. We're open to any comments in that chat room as well. Okay. We'll stay on another couple of minutes, give you all a chance to kind of ruminate on the PowerPoint or the information we've given you, to see if you have any more questions. We want to give you plenty of time. Okay. I have a question that says, will this information that you've shared tonight be available to review it later? Yes, absolutely. It will be posted on our website. Again, that website is clarkcountyschoolsdisparitystudy.com. So give us a couple of days and it'll be posted there as well. Okay. All right, going once, going twice. Well, we thank you all for joining us. Again, if you have further questions, just let us know. We're excited, always excited to do new studies and to get moving with this. So it'll be probably close to the end of the year, or probably because of the holidays, probably be January when we hold the public hearings and focus groups. I expect the survey will probably go out in about, will be out probably close to, we'll probably want to get it out before Thanksgiving so people have time to respond to it before the holidays. And interviews will be starting shortly. So if you get a phone call, those are randomly selected interviews. So, and they're kind of case studies. So if you get a phone call about that, please participate. Okay, thank you all. And I hope you all have a great evening. Stay safe and well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.